Hi, and welcome to another edition of Jules Voto's Photo Focus. Recently, I did a video on adapting lenses to the Nikon PB4 Bellows. And one of the viewers asked me a question and said, can you please show some sample images of different lenses on the Bellows? So what I did in that first video was basically just talked about the equipment, showed how the lenses were adapted and so forth. So I decided to take his advice, and so we have this video. Now here is an image of what I use. There is the PB4 with the Helios 44M attached and some of the other lenses. There's a projection lens there. There's a very old 85 millimeter 4.5. I think it was an enlarging lens. Someone gave it to me years ago. There's the Nikon Nikkor 135 5.6 enlarging lens. And also we have a 105 millimeter 2.8 M42 mount Takumar lens. You also see the F to Z adapter there on the right in front of the Takumar. Now the F to Z adapter was used to attach the Bellows to the Z8, and I used a M42 to Nikon F mount to mount the Helios, which is an M42 mount lens, and the 105 Takumar to the Bellows. And I also used an M39 Leica screw mount adapter to Nikon F mount to mount the enlarging lenses to the Bellows. The projection lens was an old Bell & Howell projection lens, and I mounted that in a Nikon F bayonet mount that I had, and that went directly to the Bellows. Okay, so here are all the lenses lined up, and left to right we have the Helios, that old enlarging lens. I'll talk about a little bit more about each of these lenses when we get to the pictures. And we also have the projection lens, the Takumar, and finally the Nikon 135 5.6 enlarging lens. Now for lighting, I just used a couple of flashes. On the left, you see the Godox V1, which was attached to the camera with the SC28 off-camera shoe cord. And to the left, I had set up a little small Flashpoint R2 and Flashpoint Mini. And that was set for 1 2/3 stops negative exposure compensation. I used TTL exposure compensation. The Godox was at full power. So now let's start looking at some images that I shot. And these first images were shot with the Nikkor 135 5.6 enlarging lens. That lens was designed for enlarging 4x5 negatives. It's one of the older models. There were some newer ones. This was one of the old ones. So here is the setup for the first picture we're going to see of some lettuce. You see the camera in the foreground there, and the little mini flash to the left, and the Godox V1 to the right with the cord. All right, and here is the resulting image that was shot at f11 and ISO of 200. And it's pretty sharp. That enlarging lens is very sharp. It's flat field, so it'd be good for copying flat objects, shooting documents, coins, whatever. Okay, so I changed the setup just a little bit. You noticed in the background, I have a black cloth, and I just taped it to the wall. Previous image, I had a black card back there, and I noticed when I was setting up to do this pepper pictures, it just looked too bright. So I wanted a deep black, so I just taped that cloth to the wall using some gaffer's tape. So I had 3 peppers. I just lined them up. Still, again, this is still with the 135 lens. And here we have the resulting image. And you can see that background went completely black now. There was a little bit of modification done to these in Lightroom to darken the blacks just a little bit. I then put out a couple onions, well, actually 1 onion. I just cut the end off, and just laid them down. I raised the camera up a little bit and shot down a little, And this one was shot at f/16, again with that 135 lens. I think it's pretty sharp. Okay, now here is the what I think is an enlarging lens. It has a very small mount, and that brass ring you see there adapts that lens to the M39, and it's sitting on that adapter because the lens was falling over, and I wanted to, shoot it straight on. And it's a 85 millimeter 4.5. It looks like it says Paris on it, so I assume it's a French lens. And so I figured, you know what? Let's give it a shot. Let's see what it can do. So I shot the onions with it at its minimum aperture, which was f/11. And it's definitely not as sharp as the 135, but it has an interesting look to it. And here's a shot of a cucumber straight on with that same lens at f/11. And I think that's decently sharp. I don't know. I kind of like the look of this lens. I don't know. I don't know how much I'll use it in the future. All right, so now this is a Bell & Howell projection lens. Years ago, I had a Bell & Howell cube projector for 35 millimeter slides. Projector broke years ago. I saved the lens, put it into a Nikon F mount, and epoxied it in. And I figured, well, let me give this lens a shot. I don't know what the aperture is. I don't know what the focal length is. So I took some little mini carrots, cut the ends off them, stacked them up, and took this picture. And it's not the sharpest, but I don't know. I kind of like the look of this too. And you could see the highlights, how they kind of bloom. And then I shot a pepper straight on, and the focus was on that green part, not the stem, that green part. And I think it's decent. The stem itself, you could see, is out of focus. And then I did one more thing with this lens. I shot two peppers, and the focus was on the point of that pepper on the right. Now, most of this is out of focus. Maybe I'm nuts, but I kind of like the way that looks. Okay, so now we have the Helios 44M. This lens has a very good reputation. It's a Pentax M42 mount, so I use that adapter for the M42 to Nikon F. And I've used this lens before. It has very good bokeh, but on this lens, we use it for close-ups. It's a 58 millimeter f2. And in this image, I forgot to stop it down. When you're using these manual lenses, these enlarging lenses or any lens on the Bellows, you have to open it up wide open to focus and then stop it down. And I forgot to stop it down, and that's the result. So there's not very much in focus here. Again, the focus was on that green part. So here we are. I then realized my mistake and I stopped it down to f/11. Again, the lighting is the same. The Godox V1, about 45 degrees up high to the right with a diffuser, and the little mini to the left. So here I shot a lemon. I like to shoot lemons and limes, if anybody has seen some of my previous videos. And I think this is pretty sharp. This lens is pretty sharp. This is at f/11. And right here, you'll see my setup for the lime, which is following, but the lemon was done the exact same way. And I just had to raise it up with a box, so I threw my cloth over the box, as you can see here. Okay, so here's a shot of the lime. Same setup as previous as for the lemon. I handheld, however, that little mini off to the left. So I was using the Godox in the radio mode, so it works really well. And then, again, basically the same setup. And the pencil point also was at f/11 with the Helios. And the focus was, I guess, about an inch to the left of the point, an inch left back from the point. Now, one thing with this PB4 Bellows, it has tilt and shift. So I tilted the lens to try to get more of the pencil in focus. And I also stopped, that previous picture was at f/11. I stopped down to f/16 to try to help with the depth of field. But your depth of field is very narrow at this range. So I think that tilt helped a little bit. You notice the point here looks pretty sharp. And of course, stopping down helped as well to add a little bit of depth of field. Okay, so now we're going to look at the final lens that I use, which is the 105 2.8 Super Takumar. This is a very good portrait lens. I picked this up really inexpensively several years back. And I figured, well, let's see how it works on the Bellows. So I had a couple of my father's medals here, a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. He was in World War II, landed on D-Day with the 29th Division, and I put a flag behind the medals. And using the 105 Takumar, this is the result. Again, my lighting was basically the same. I handheld the little mini flash to the left and low. That picked up some of the texture in the flag. And then this was a knife he brought back from the war. It says made in Finland. It's a small knife. And I just figured, well, let me shoot the blade with the 105. And the 105 is very sharp. It worked out great. These were done at f11. So I hope this has helped. I hope this has shown you what you can do with these adapted lenses on a Bellows. You don't need to use the PB4, any Bellows. You know, Bellows were made for, I know Minolta made them, Pentax made them, Canon probably made them. And there's third-party companies that made them. I believe Novaflex still makes them. And you could get adapters to adapt them to probably almost any camera. And on the front end there, as I have shown you, you could adapt many different lenses to these Bellows. So it's just another tool that we have to experiment with a good variety of lenses. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I try to respond to all questions, or send me an email with your questions. So thanks for watching. I usually publish a new video every Monday morning and Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So I will talk to you then.